previous segment described and demonstrated commonly used measures for performing financial analysis and comparing leasehold interests. This segment of the course will go into further detail about different types of leases and provide additional total effective rent definitions. In this segment, we will explain the relationship of lease types to operating expenses and the base rent, discuss the importance to both the user and the landlord of selecting the appropriate lease type, describe the characteristics typically found in a gross lease, a modified gross lease, a full-service lease, and a net lease. The various rent leases are defined primarily by the treatment of operating expenses and which party pays them. In other words, which operating expenses the landlord pays and which operating expenses the user pays. Lease terminology and included expenses vary from market to market, landlord to landlord, and even building to building. Thus, it's very important for both the user and the landlord to understand exactly which operating expenses will be included as part of the base rent and which operating on a continuum as shown below. Click the Continue button to see a detailed description of each lease type in the continuum. Click the Continue button to see a detailed description of each lease type in the continuum. The one exception to the continuum of standard leasing types is a percentage rent lease, which is typically only found in retail leases. Percentage rent leases usually are structured as net leases, but in addition to the triple net costs such as property taxes, insurance, standard operating expenses, utilities, and janitorial service, the tenant also pays the landlord a predetermined percentage of their retail sales above a defined breakpoint. Note that regardless of the lease structure, the user ultimately pays operating expenses either as part of their base rent or in addition. When completing an in-depth lease analysis, all cash flows or costs to the user must be included to determine the total effective rent. The basic formula for calculating the effective rent cost of occupancy is shown below. Base or contract rent plus additional costs minus concessions and/or allowances equals total effective rent or rate if divided by square footage. The analysis must be adapted and expanded for the circumstances of each lease. The expanded formula calculating the effective rent cost of occupancy is shown below. Base rent or contract plus amortized percentage rent, retail only, plus amortized TIs as additional rent, plus parking, plus real estate taxes, plus operating expenses or CAM charges, plus total tenant improvements, plus moving expenses, plus existing lease buyout costs, plus special costs, for example, parking, minus rent and allowance, minus moving expense allowance, minus existing lease buyout allowance, minus other concessions, equals effective rent paid by the user or tenant. This segment has examined different types of leases and provided additional total effective rent definitions. In the next segment of the course, you'll look at multi-period leases.